So let's go over the assignments so far, what we have. Let's see, let's go to, not that one. WebDev. And we have the website so far. We have here for the graduate folks, we have this index page, and then let's run this, and let's navigate there in the assignments graduate index. So we have this landing page for our home page, and then we can go into a login page, type whatever login, click on login, and then we go to the list of websites. Yeah, and then from there we can then navigate to a list of pages, and then once we click on the list of pages, we see the widgets themselves. Yes? Yeah, I think that's as far as we got last time around. Let's focus on this first page, right? When you're logging in, this is the first interaction, dynamic interaction that the user has with our website, right? Being able to log in, we need some logic that takes the username and password and verifies whether this user exists or not, right? And then we greet them, or if it's successful, or we say we'll try again with another username and password if it's unsuccessful. So let's implement that, right? Just for this one page, and then we'll build on that idea. Okay? All right. So let's go here. Am I recording? Yes. Let's see what we have so far. So let's see. We have the index page, we have the website vendor, and so on and so forth, right? So let's see. We have for the user, we have the login page right there. Let's name it the way it should be named. Right. The name is that we decided on. Was it going to be login and then view and then client, right? So it's the responsibility is that it's a view. It's rendering something for an end user, and it's being rendered dynamically on the client side, so on the browser. Okay. Let's see. Did we break it? Okay, it's no longer there, but this would be login dot view dot client. Okay. But probably, did we break it here? If we go to login? Okay, so we broke it there. That's fine. We'll fix all that. Login, and then what was it? View client. There we go. All right, so to make this dynamic, we need to hook it up with a controller that can listen for an incoming login page, login event, right? And then have it check to see if this user exists in some collection of users, right? So let's do that. Let's go to the login view. It's this one right here. And we'll need to create a controller for this. To create a controller, we'll first have to hook it up with an Angular application, right? So let's hook it up with an Angular application. So we're going to hook it up with ng app. We'll call it the WAM application, right? Right now, this ng app WAM application is really doesn't mean anything yet. So before we do that, we'll need to actually load the framework, the Angular framework. So let's do that. Let's see where we have it. I had installed it earlier today, and I put it under vendor and Angular. There it is, Angular min. All right. So let's load that as a script. We're gonna go fetch it. Locally, so it's going to go way up there. Are we at vendor? Is this the place? Let's see. There it is. Angular. There it is. There we go. We have the Angular framework. If we load it, if we haven't broken anything just yet. Nothing. No complaints on the right-hand side. Very good. Let's keep going. So we're going to declare now this application. We're going to say that this is the WAM application, right? So this new attribute, which is not part of the standard HTML set of attributes, right? It's a new attribute that was created by Angular itself, right? The Angular framework, and we're going to refer to these later on as directives that are extensions to the HTML language that that Angular allows you to create, and then we'll create our own. We'll create our own extensions to the Angular language. Okay, we create our own tags, our own attributes, our own classes. It'll be pretty cool. So right now, this particular directive allows you to declare or associate this index page with an Angular module called WAM, which if you load it, notice that it complains saying that I can't find that module. If you click on the URL in the error, it gives you some clues of what went wrong. It says that I was looking for a WAM module, but I couldn't find it. Right? So let's go back and actually declare one. So to declare one, we're going to do it in our own script file, app.js, which right now is going to live in the same directory as my login view. Right? So right where my login view is, according to this, it lives right in the same directory. So let's create that. There's app.js. And in here is where we're going to declare that module that we're looking for, right? That Angular is looking for. This app.js, so this WAM module. So let's do that. Now, if you remember, all our JavaScript code, we're going to declare it using this design pattern, the iffy design pattern, right? It's a mechanism that allows us to protect the namespace from anything we declare in here, any variables, any functions that we declare. We don't want to litter the namespace out there, right? This is only concerns the client, the browser, code that runs on the browser. Code that runs on the server doesn't have that issue, okay? Because it doesn't compete with other libraries, right? Node.js already has a module mechanism, right? Here we don't have a module mechanism unless you're using newer versions of JavaScript, right? Here, this is a very common design pattern for protecting the namespace. Put everything inside of a function, right, and then self-execute it. Okay, all right. That's what they call immediately invoked function expressions. Okay, so in here, the code that we're going to put in here is that we want to use the Angular object that is declared by the Angular library. Right, when the Angular library loads, it declares a single object. Right, the Angular object. There it is, and we're using it everywhere. What we're going to do is we're going to create the WAM module. So this string needs to match that string. Okay, and right here, what this syntax says is that I want to get a hold of the WAM module, but the WAM module doesn't exist. Right? Typically, a function, a common syntax in JavaScript of when you're creating your own functions is that a function that takes a single argument is sometimes the typical behavior is that it's a getter or it's a read operation. You're retrieving, right, something by the name of WAM, right? It's a read operation. If typically the same function, if it takes more than one argument, if you give it more than one argument, is often interpreted as a set operation or a write operation. Same function, right? But if you give it more than one attribute or parameter, it's considered a write. If you give it a single argument, it's a read operation. Right? It's a very common way of implementing setters and getters. Right? In Java, you would implement dedicated setters and getters. Yes. In most other object-oriented languages, it's a very common pattern that for every attribute in a class, right, you provide a setter and a getter. Right? In JavaScript, it's a little different. The pattern is to use the same function, right? But if it's a single argument, is a set. It's a get. If you give it more arguments, it's interpreted as a set, as a write operation. Okay, it's a convention, just like setter and getters are conventions. Yes. All right, so we don't really need the second argument. I'm only giving it because I want it to be a write operation. I want to create the new WAM module. Everybody okay? All right, so let's do that. Let's create it. So if I reload, notice that it doesn't give me the error anymore. It says I found the WAM, right? I found So this one was looking for the WAM. It found it, right, because it's declared in my app.js. Everybody good? All right. All right. So what I want to be able to do is I want to be listening for this click for this in this hyperlink over here, right? So to do that, we need an ng click and say and notify my controller that I just clicked on this on this login function on this login button, and I want to notify my controller by invoking some function on that controller, right? Presumably a login function, right? But I don't have a controller just yet, right? So let's create a controller that actually implements this login function, right? So we can invoke it from here. So to do that, we can use the ng controller directive and say that the I like to bind this to a controller, and let's bind it to a controller called a login controller. If I render this, notice that it's going to say I can't find the login controller that you're referring to. And it says the controller with the name login controller is not registered. And indeed, we never register it, right? We are referring to something that doesn't exist just yet. We need to declare it. So to declare it, let's copy that and go back to our app. And we did this last week or the week before, I believe. And we used the controller decorator, right? That says I am declaring this name, right? I am decorating the following function. This function, right? This function, which I'm referring to here by reference, I am decorating it as a controller, and I'm giving it a global name in the framework. Anywhere in the framework, anybody can refer to this controller by name, right? And indeed, the view is referring to it by name. Okay, whatever name I give it here, right? Whatever name I give it, it would be mapped here. What? Okay, those have to match, right? And it's mapped to whatever login instance I give it. All right? But I'm not going to use that weird name. I like to use these same names everywhere so I can keep my head straight. Right? I just keep everything so that I know what maps to what. But again, it's a convention, right? And your team might have a different convention, right? I like to use the same name all throughout the, all the way from the client through the web service to the database, so I can have a clear mapping all the way through the stack, right? Otherwise, I just go crazy, right? All right, so in here, we can now say a console log, and let's see if we are loading this controller. And if we reload it, indeed, notice that we are hitting that console right there, right? Which is being implemented, is being loaded because it's being referenced here. Because it's being referenced here. Everybody good? All right. So in here, notice that we want to invoke a login function on that controller, right? And so to do the binding between the view and the controller, the binding we saw last week, that the binding happens across the scope. The scope is a variable that allows you to bind variables from here to variables in the controller, or functions in one to be referenced in the other. Right? So, for instance, I can reference that login function that you are referring to in the here, right? By declaring it on the scope, so that we can call it. Right? So we can call it here, and then we can do a console log, and just print out that we are in the login function. Okay, so that if we render this again and click on login, it didn't work. What? Oh, wait a minute. What happened? Yeah, I have href, right? I am literally navigating away from this page, which we don't want to do. Okay. Also, remember to add nice white spacing, right, so that it's easier to read. Right. Each one of these is a legitimate piece of code, line of code, right? Let's try that again. So if I click on login, notice that I am invoking the login function at line 8 right there. Okay, everybody good? So the next thing we'd like to be able to do is pass it a username and a password, username and password of variables that are here, local to me over here. So to do that, we saw that we can declare new variables using the ng model and give it a name here, username, and then another ng model here, ng model password, right? And then we're passing these local variables that are declared here. We're passing it to the login function. The login function can receive those two, username and password, and then print them out, see what they look like. Okay, so if we refresh and go to the console, if we type whatever here, we click on login, notice that we are receiving that data on the controller, right? So what we'd like to be able to do is see if that user exists in some collection of users. And we did give you a collection of users to use, and so let's reuse those in here. I believe we gave you a list of users. These 4 users, let's grab those and let's declare them as a local array here, users, an array, which then the function can then iterate and find to see if that user actually exists in that collection, right? So to do that, we can iterate over the collection var u in users, and then compare the username against all those objects, right? Those coming from some other object-oriented languages might think that this variable u is bound to each one of these instances, these objects, but it's not. That would be true in Java or .NET. Here, u is just an index, right? So u here is just 0, 1, 2, 3, and so on and so forth, right? It's just an index, unfortunately. So if you want to retrieve an actual user, you need to use users sub u, right? So you have that object. Yes, right? And then we can compare. We can say if user.username is triple equal username. Okay, it's a good practice to get used to using triple equals, right? Not double equals. Triple equals checks, the first thing that it checks to see if it's the same data type, right? So it does not allow casting, right? If you use a double equal, what JavaScript will try to do is see if it can cast one of the variables to the other data type, right? And then do the comparison, right? So for instance, the number 1 would be the same as the character 1, right? Those would be equal, right? But we don't want to do that. It's a good practice. That's a big source of errors in coding. So we want to avoid doing that. Get in the habit of using triple equals instead, right? So we're going to check to see if the usernames match and if user.password, if the passwords match. Password. Okay. If they match, we're going to have maybe a found. We're going to have we did find it. We say found equal true, and perhaps we're going to break. We're done. We found it, and we might say if found. We might send maybe we might say scope message is equal welcome, and then the username. Otherwise, we might say scope message equal sorry, username not found. Please try again. Okay, or something like that. Yes, right. And then we can render that here in right above the login, or somewhere here. We could say maybe in an H3. You can say a message here, right? So that if we render that, right? If we just type some gibberish, it'll say sorry, not found. Please try again. But if we type Bob and Bob, it says welcome Bob. All right, that makes sense. Now you might want to paint this a little bit using some of the Bootstrap classes. maybe as an alert, and you can look that up on Bootstrap. Alerts are just boxes that allow you to just display short messages, and you can paint it with different colors. Maybe info. Why are you not? Oh, Bootstrap. I don't have Bootstrap local. So if I have that, notice that there it is, my message, and it'll say sorry, undefined, or welcome Bob, right? But you notice that it shows all the time, so you might want to decide to show it sometimes and not show it sometimes. If there's no message, I'm not going to show it. If there's a message, I will show it. So for instance, we can use some of the attributes, ng attributes, to show the content or not show the content depending on some rule. We can say that we can use ng show or ng if. ng show will say show this div, this content, if the expression in here is truthy. Truthy meaning not zero, not empty string, not false. It's truthy, right? So for instance, we might say message. We can use the same expression message, right? which by default is undefined. It's an undefined variable, or at least it's an empty string, right, to start with. And so this will not show, right? So it doesn't show up until you have an error, and then it shows. Make sense? All right. Let's leave it here. We'll come back and we'll refactor this using some good practice. All right.